Welcome. Hello and welcome. My name is Kevin Rockwell, and today I'm joined by Carl Shames, and we're talking about neurofeedback as a methodology, a treatment for various ailments, symptoms that folks might have. And today we're going to talk about using neurofeedback for things that children have wrong, ADD, ADHD, and others. So I'd like to welcome Carl Shames. And Carl, can you tell us a little bit about using neurofeedback with children?
Yeah, neurofeedback is helpful with a great variety of problems that kids are having today. But I think I'd want to start out saying one thing that neurofeedback teaches us, and the practice of it demonstrates all the time, it's really not that useful to think in terms of these kind of discrete disease categories. The way the field of mental health has developed, we have a diagnostic manual that lists all the different categories of problems as though they're each kind of a separate entity. So, and parents will come to me wondering, does their kid have ADD? Much the same way, they might go to the doctor and wonder, does he have mononucleosis or, pneumonia or something like that? And I feel that neurofeedback has shown that it's not constructive to really think that way. What we do have is a vast array of dimensions in which we function, and virtually everyone has some difficulties along some dimensions, and so it's really all a matter of continua. Some people are a little more anxious than others. Some people have a little more problem with memory, concentration, this, that, the other thing. Nobody is tuned perfectly. But some people, these sort of difficulties congeal in certain ways, and so you get patterns and symptoms, and that we call ADD, or we might call Asperger's, and so on. But very often the kids I see, a lot of problems are kind of mixed together. So with ADD, typically, we have problems with focusing. They just can't pay attention properly. Their mind drifts, and it either drifts inward, where they're thinking about something that they want to think about, or it drifts outward, where they're distracted by whatever might be going on. It could be other kids talking, a bus passing, virtually anything. So, but one way or another, they have trouble paying attention. They might have trouble. Go ahead.
The bright, shiny object.
Yeah, that. Kids with ADD have trouble staying on task, trouble doing their homework. Very often just getting their homework started is a difficulty. Just things like that. But very often kids with ADD also have sleep difficulties. So, and in many cases, the so-called ADD really is just a matter of sleep problems. They don't sleep well enough, and then they have all these symptoms that are basically from sleep deprivation. Now, I'm not saying all ADD is that, but some of it is, and some of the times it's all mixed together. Other kids have panic attacks, oppositional behavior. They're very argumentative. They're very socially awkward. Many of the ADD kids I have are unusually bright, and sometimes it seems like while their brain is very highly functioning in some areas, it's not functioning well in another area. Or it's like getting a Maserati that needs tune-ups more than a Chevy or something. So it's not a simple thing. Kids very often will have a mixture of a lot of different issues. Sleep is a very big one. Many kids, even who seem to be sleeping well, are not. Many times parents are not aware of the extent to which their child is having sleep difficulties. Some kids come and wake up their parents and say, or they come in out of the room and say, I can't sleep. But many kids, I find, don't do that, and the parents really weren't aware of just how long it's taking the kid to fall asleep. So what neurofeedback does, it just so it addresses the whole picture of imbalances and dysfunctions in brain activity, and so in the process of straightening out one thing, it often straightens out another thing. So with sleep, for instance, kids become better able to fall asleep Many kids take a half an hour, 2 hours to fall asleep. It really should be under 15 minutes from the time the lights go out. Some kids have trouble waking up in the morning, and these are very often the kids with ADD who are sort of dreamy. It's kind of like they never totally woke up. So those are dysfunctions of brain activity, and neurofeedback clears those up pretty readily. Let's see.
Can you
Go
tell me
ahead.
a little bit about, say a parent brings their child in who has some of these issues, and you treat them. Tell me a little bit about maybe the process of treating them, how long it takes, versus, and then maybe contrast that to what else is out there.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's an interesting question because, say, for ADD, there could be so many causes of it. In sort of the pure form of ADD, there's no particular cause. It's just that's the way your brain is tuned. And you came into the world just sort of tuned up in a certain way or tuned down a certain way. So if you're tuned down, your brain, you're sort of sluggish and your brain isn't really waking up. If you're tuned up, usually you have trouble falling asleep. Very often neurofeedback is able to readjust this really within the first 3 to 5 sessions. It can be very fast and very dramatic. A kid who might have taken 2 hours to fall asleep for his entire life now is falling asleep in 5 or 10 minutes. A kid who had trouble waking up, or some kids, really can't get themselves up in the morning. After 5, 7 sessions, that's cleared up. So in those cases, it's very dramatic, and usually the ADD symptoms start getting cleared up very rapidly when that's happening. Now, other cases, though, can be a lot more complicated. Sometimes there were birth difficulties. Births now, the number of natural births, the percentage of natural births is declining. So now, I don't know if you still have forceps births, but you'll have a lot of cesareans, a lot of Pitocin. Last year, the research found that babies who where labor was induced with Pitocin, the incidence of ADD is about 35 to 50% higher. And I can actually, in my work, I can feel a Pitocin kid by the way they're responding to the neurofeedback. That they're not responding as quickly and readily as I would find that something sort of blocked. And usually, when I ask, sure enough, that's a Pitocin kid. So we use these drugs, and we're handed these drugs as though it's nothing. But pharmaceuticals are very powerful, and something that's powerful enough to induce labor is powerful enough to have a profound effect on the infant's nervous system. So many cases of ADD are actually from medical practices in birth. Cesareans, for instance, are actually traumatic for an infant. They're suddenly just popped out into another environment. And so very often the nervous system is sort of traumatized and doesn't really get working properly. So very often what's called ADD can result from problems such as that, in which case it can take a little longer. But in all those cases, the neurofeedback will address it. And you asked, compared to what else is out there, aside from medication, there isn't anything else out there. And usually medication, is really limited. In some cases, it can really help with some symptoms. But if you take, say, these Pitocin kids, and I don't know the percentage of births that are induced by Pitocin, but it's a lot. The medication isn't going to do real well with them. They're not going to react very well, and then everybody's going to wonder what's wrong, and it'll go on. And really, it just takes a while and very often cranial osteopathy, craniosacral therapy, is needed because there was literally a trauma to the nervous system. So that's a long answer to your question. If it's straightforward, it can take 5, 10 sessions, you can be done. And even in the first 5 sessions, you have most of everything cleared up. If there are other issues, it can take longer. But even then, up to, say, 15, 20 sessions at most. Usually everything's cleared up.
Okay, but if you're talking 5 to 15 sessions, say.
I'd say, yeah. Well, no, I'd say
I'm just
very often 5 sessions, most of the symptoms are cleared up. But to really stabilize
but to a parent who might have been struggling with their child,
yes, nothing.
For years they might have been struggling with their child, trying to help them. And
Yep.
now, you're talking about something that could take less than, well, it was just outside ballpark, less than a year. You're talking about something that could, in less than a year, you might be able to dial this kid in, and the parent sees a dramatic improvement.
Well, it's much less than a year. It's a couple of months. And the way neurofeedback, the way I practice it, and the way many people practice it now, it doesn't require a very complex evaluation system. So the evaluation is really in the treatment. We see how the kid is responding, and that tells us what we need to do. So that saves a lot of money, and it saves time from what used to be an expensive um, evaluation process. So, for instance, I've had parents bring in neuropsych workups that cost them $3,000, and endless hours of agony for this kid. And what did it really accomplish? It um, didn't really tell them anything that they didn't know already. And there's really it doesn't lead to any real treatment plan. Usually what it leads to is a plan in school where the kid gets special attention, special possibilities, and sit closer to the blackboard or whatever. But there's really no treatment. All they have is medication. So neurofeedback is the first really effective treatment for these dysfunctions of brain patterns. And that's why I'm so excited about this. It's a whole new world of possibility. So yeah, very often these things that parents struggled with for years and years, and a lot of anguish, and trying medication, it didn't work, things got worse. Then they come to neurofeedback, and really in a couple of months things can be cleared up. And so the whole cost is less than that family trip up to Tahoe for 5 days. So I think it's a wonderful new treatment modality. I want to mention one other thing. That, I get a certain type of kid. And the medical people don't know exactly how to diagnose it. There's multiple symptoms and multiple problems, and very often these kids were adopted. Very often they had traumatic births, traumatic first year of life, a lot of deficits. And neurofeedback is just wonderful. It's the only modality that can really address these problems. And it's very exciting and gratifying work to see improvement in these kids.
Well, with these talks we're doing on Google Hangout, we're trying to get the word out. Is there pushback from the old way of doing things to keep this from being known, or is there criticism that? What do you think makes this that it isn't more well known for?
Well, there are the debunkers, and actually, right here in Berkeley, there's the university. There's a professional debunker. I forgot his name. The people who go there on the internet or they write books and say, "Well, this is a lot of hogwash. It's unproven," so on and so forth. And so there's an interesting question. So the guy at Berkeley, I actually called him up and invited him to come here 10 minutes away from the university and have a few sessions or bring his kids. He didn't respond to that. But typically, the authorities will say, well, this is unproven. It's not scientific. And, but that really raises the question of, well, what's science? Human technology advanced throughout all of human history long before there was, the FDA and NIMH and what they call the double-blind experiments. And, science begins with just observing things and observing what works. And anybody who practices neurofeedback sees that it works. But nevertheless, you get these people in positions of authority who will insist, oh, well, it's just imaginary, or, it's unproven, and so on. So there is that. On the other hand, there's been a lot of advances. Neurofeedback is now officially recognized by some pediatric society. This just happened recently as the best non-medical treatment for ADD. So that was a real bump up in the status. It's also being recognized for its work with PTSD. The institute where I studied, out of their own funds, created a program for vets using the neurofeedback for the PTSD, and it was very effective. And so the VA is starting to recognize that. So little by little, it's being more recognized. But there has been a lot of I don't know if I would call it pushback. Certainly resistance to recognizing, a new modality. And frankly, I could, sort of see why it's kind of amazing, and it's hard to believe. You have to sort of see it to believe it. But anyone practicing this has just seen repeatedly how well it does.
Well, I'd like to suggest, Carl, that the next time we do one of these, that we talk about PTSD because we are going to see an incredible flood of veterans coming home from the wars of recent years, and I have the feeling this is going to be a major issue in our country of how to treat these folks. So I'd like to discuss that in further detail.
Absolutely. Yeah, neurofeedback is being recognized as a primary and very basic treatment. I wouldn't say the only treatment. I think PTSD requires a sort of multimodal approach. But little by little, neurofeedback is proving itself to be kind of the most fundamental component of this multimodal approach.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you for joining me today, and we'll look forward to chatting further about using neurofeedback.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity.